we changed the title a little while back. So it's no longer the curse of geography, and more specifically, Geo-Strategic imperatives for Pakistan, whilst confronting the challenges from violent non-state actors. So this is what I'm going to go through briefly. Let's get through this. Just an indication of the outline, and I'll jump straight into it without much ado. I mean, shooting you is good. As always, I do a disclaimer beforehand. These are my views and do not represent NDU or the government of Pakistan. And just in case other people are confused, this is the actual government version of the map of Pakistan. So then, if you do in future use such maps, the government version is the best one. And if they get it wrong, then you know who to blame. Right, then let's start here. Pakistan is confronted by an existential threat, domestic as well as international, since the beginning of the country and the creation of the country, in fact. However, in recent times, or the last decade or so and more, we've had a much bigger threat from within rather than without. And these are some of the few actors that are involved, the main actors within the country that are based here. In fact, this is just a handful of them. Pakistan has recently, in the National Internal Security Policy, noted 60 proscribed or banned organizations. Some of these organizations, in general, all dictate that they have certain demands for Pakistan, and this is the reason why they're opposing Pakistan, whether based on nationalist issues, ethnic issues, on religious issues, or sectarian issues. And some of these based on structural discrimination within Pakistan. But when we look at that, and we look at generally every country in the world, there is some form of structural discrimination, systemic discrimination, because there is no developed country in the world. Every country is still developing, some more than others. However, some of the most basic demands that they have are that they reject, and some of the most militant organizations reject Pakistan's constitution outright. And many are absolutist and binary in their interpretation, which means they see black and white and very little gray area for discussion. It is a yes or no, mine or yours, and if it's mine, I'm going to go the whole hog. I can't compromise on the way. There is no reconciliation between my point of view and yours as far as the violent non-state actors are concerned. Many of them, the religious ones, would like Islamic Sharia, but their own interpretation of Islamic Sharia, which majority of this country could never abide by. A very literal, binary interpretation without any understanding of the historical evolution of the Muslim Ummah since 1400 years. Yet the conflict is continuing to be sustained. There are many internal factors. Some of the core issues that they rely on are, as I mentioned, structural discrimination, especially in the Fatah region. FCR laws, restricted rights, collective punishments. These are the main arguments. Political agencies. Who does that benefit? Does it benefit the people? They say not. It doesn't benefit them. Some of the external factors that they outline and announce are the external interference of Western countries, especially the United States and Europe, in our Muslim neighbors, in Iraq, in Syria, especially in Libya lately, in Yemen, what is happening in Yemen. US foreign policy has been the mainstay of their opposition, and US drone attacks were some of the main elements that they talked about, although they have diminished lately. So there's one up for Pakistan in that respect. However, there are direct threats to Pakistan from the region also. violent non-state actors from outside. And we've seen the rise of some of these very famous ones. Al-Qaeda was there, but it's been superseded by ISIS, Iraq and Syria, or Al-Sham, or the Levant, or just the Islamic State, or Daesh. Call it what you want. They have a very extreme militant version, and their actions define how we see them as well. Yet they're rising everywhere. And this is one of the things I want to concentrate on as far as Pakistan is concerned. There are very diverse transnational linkages between many of these organizations throughout the world, especially in the Muslim world. You have the TTP in Pakistan, ATIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, Boko Haram, Ansar al-Sharia, Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula in Yemen, Jund al-Khalifa in Yemen also, in Algeria also, in Morocco also, and in Mali. They have many linkages, and this is the point of concern that I have. Currently, Afghan Taliban has indicated that they're having a jihad against ISIS, but that hasn't come into any physical form as yet. It's just verbal airwaves. But if you look at this slide and understand the immense challenge that the Muslim world, especially Pakistan, faces, if Pakistan has 60 proscribed banned organizations, and each of these countries have many such organizations, different ones that are banned, you can imagine the extent of the problem that we face. And if the linkages are increasing on multiple different levels, from initially from the tactical level, when there's an initial interaction on a tactical, sharing operations, and then even strategic level, linkages are occurring between different organizations, calling them in different areas, interacting with each other, going across borders, sharing resources. You can see the challenge that we face in Pakistan also, because Tehrik-e-Taliban has recently announced last year, at the end of the last year, that they are making an allegiance. Many of the commanders that dissociated themselves with the Tehrik-e-Taliban, who have left Tehrik-e-Taliban, have made an association with ISIS and other similar organizations. That means transnational linkages in many directions. We thought we had an existential threat just in Pakistan by Pakistani organizations and non-state actors. But these threats are based upon hybrid threats, conventional, irregular, criminality, for example, which are interconnected, unpredictable, combined with traditional, mixed with irregular, applied simultaneously and adaptively in time and space. What does that mean? They're able to adapt to a whole host of irregular means to confront what they call their enemies. I think so far we've been lucky. Iraq is not lucky. Syria is not lucky. If we do not confront these organizations, if we do not confront these transnational linkages, if we abide by them and help them through the political process, through appeasement, I guarantee we'll be facing the same eventuality. I'm sure our representative from the current sitting government would have a different point of view. But they are using our critical vulnerabilities. They use cyber warfare, terrorism, organized crime, non-kinetic means, high technology, very educated. In fact, there are thousands of recruits from Europe and the United States and Australia who are highly educated, who go there because they're disaffected from the way they're treated in those countries, and from Pakistan, no doubt. They blend these capabilities and use them against their target countries. What is their strategy? The idea is a combination of kinetic action and psychological impact. There are various stages that they use as strategic instruments. Force long-term economic, military, cultural, and political changes in those countries, in effect by completely cleaning those countries up. That's the psychology that they have. In order to change a system, you have to demolish the system. We may think that Iraq and Syria are destroyed, and they are. But to them, that's part of the process. That destruction, the hundreds of thousands of deaths, misery. Do we want that for this country? Degrading local and regional governance. And by doing so, creating vacuums, which they will fill, because there's never really a vacuum in power. The government may not impose its writ, but they will, and thereby undermine regional stability. Violent non-state actors and their irregular strategy is to use political violence, use the media as a force multiplier to influence regional psyches, as they are doing right now around the Muslim world. And there's no doubt about that. This is not just an existential threat for the Muslim world now. Many of the countries in Europe, in the States, in Russia, China are very much worried about these things, eventualities. We can't take this lightly anymore. They use an old strategy. Mao Zedong developed this from, in fact, Sun Tzu, which I teach, to build the base, use irregular warfare, such as insurgency tactics, use terrorism, undermine the system, create fear, hostility, tension, and when they have the ability to acquire large-scale resources in military. Now, we can't see this much in Pakistan. We're very lucky with the military. But who's to know what will happen tomorrow? The United States is leaving Afghanistan, leaving a small contingent of special forces to help Afghan national forces deal with the Taliban and other non-state actors, such as Al-Qaeda. But we also already know that ISIS is implanting themselves in Afghanistan. Acquiring means to confront on a large scale is the next stage. And this is occurring in Syria, in Iraq, in Mali, partially in Nigeria, in Libya, in Yemen. Who's next? They try to exploit our internal vulnerabilities. Massive mismanagement, our apathy and fatalism, leaving everything to God, not taking responsibility, our provincialism, the division between us, the lack of identity that we have. Are we Islamic? Are we secular? Are we extremists? We don't know who we are. In essence, the country hasn't redefined itself. The leadership is weak. Weak governance everywhere. Corruption, nepotism, feudalism, political appeasement. That's the easy way out to gain votes, acquire political capital. But are you going to do anything about it? The long term is negative, not positive. It's a reactive strategy without vision. So what are our strategic choices? There's an inherent stability in our environment. However, unlike the Cold War, we have the dispute border still. The environment is not predictable as it was in the Cold War to an extent. We had two large powers who could never go to war directly. Mutual assured destruction guaranteed that. Asymmetric relations, unlimited stakes, a history of confrontation. That wasn't the United States and the West and the Warsaw Pact. We have a minimal timeline. 4 minutes. If it hits a fan, everything goes. The situation is very unstable. I've talked about before of trilateral compellence and utilization of non-state actors. We need to finish that. So I'll rush through a few things, primarily because of limited time, so we get the idea of what I'm talking about and come to a conclusion, if I can get through to the slides. And one of the pertinent issues here, one of the actual issues that China with an investment of $46 billion in Pakistan for the strategic corridor to help us rise up again. Fundamentally, at all forums that indicate this, is a tension, the vulnerability of Chinese workers. Can we really protect them? Can we protect the pipelines? Can we protect the railways, the motorways that we may build? Can we really protect that? What is our priority? Is it to build the country or support non-state actors that absolutely reject you? We need to make a political decision. There is no good Taliban, bad Taliban. There is just Taliban. There is no good militant, bad militant. There is just militant. If we want to build a safe, balanced society, militancy, extremism, violent extremism needs to finish. Our utilization of those violent extremists needs to finish. We need, once a strategy is formed, and when we reassess it with a feedback loop, when we realize it's not working, we must reassess it and formulate a new strategy, because the current strategy is destroying us. An operation here or there may not be viable enough. Political decision needs to be made to completely finish this. For example, we've had major peace treaties. There were never really major peace treaties. Until recently, even the SWAT peace treaty, which fell apart, all of them, within a matter of weeks or months. There was never really an intention to have peace, as was the case last year. There was never really an intention to have peace. All these peace treaties failed for the bare reason because the rationale by these militants, by these extremists, was to consolidate themselves, to expand themselves, to resupply themselves, to re-entrench themselves so they could fight on again with greater supplies. That was their point for having peace, not to have peace. Their idea, and many of you know that I've been involved in this for a while, and try to understand their psyche, not from a book, but from practical experience, being on the ground, in the front lines, amongst them, to understand who they were. And I'm not at all fazed by them anymore. I understand them, and because I understand them, I know what to do about it. However, most people in this country don't really understand them. They're your Muslim brothers. They're fighting the kufr, as far as they're concerned. We support that, do we, or don't we? Or do we look at our national interest? And then again, we've got confusion here. Counterterrorism or counterinsurgency? What do we utilize? One is a law enforcement completely. The other one is military. However, it is a military that conducts the counterterrorism. There's a confusion here because we do not have a capacity in the military for investigation, for policing. That's not the job. And then this is one of the reasons why things don't work. We need to be clear about what we need to do. If we're going to do law enforcement, counterterrorism, we need to build up the law enforcement capacity. There is no choice in that. So we need to have better tools, more up-to-date, that actually work in a conflict environment. And the COIN strategy, for example, that we use currently is to clear, hold, build, and develop. However, in the last couple of governments, especially during the 2008, 9, 10, 11 operations, there was no government involvement in building. Where was the government for political governance in those territories in Fatah, for example, in Swat? Didn't take place. And counter-terrorism operations must occur throughout these, joining hand in hand with the military in their domain, building capacity for the police in that domain. Next. So what are the internal solutions? Defeating the rationale of the violent non-state actors. Structural change is necessary. That's drastic change in society. We need to commit to that. Fair and honest governance. We've talked about this a lot, but it really is fair and honest governance. And that means no appeasement. Abolition, again, of violent non-state actors, period. It's even harder. Defeating their rationale requires a localized approach in those particular areas, inclusive approach, bringing the people. So we'll finish on this. There are a few more points, but then we'll finish on this, I think, to make everybody happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. That was a very nice presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the speeches, and now we come to the more interesting phase, which is question answers. We have had a wide range of subjects covered in these 4 speeches, so I hope that we will have an interesting exchange of question answers. Who will start? Identify yourself, identify the person you want to respond to your question, and keep your question short. The gentleman in the back and then the lady here.
Interesting question. NACTA side is under construction the last time I checked, so it's no longer functioning in the Ministry of Interior side, through the Ministry of Interior. NACTA didn't ban. NACTA is a non-functional defunct body. It can't do anything. It never has. 2009, when I came to NDU, January, and within months, Tariq Pervez pulled me in as a consultant to NACTA. He was a DG FIA at the time, but then he became National Controller of NACTA, which had just recently formed then. And then it formed again in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. And formed again this year, which means it's just a political use of an organization that has no real fundamental intrinsic say in anything. Decisions are not made there, and I think you know that very well.
You have I think you had another, you mentioned 2 groups actually. Jamaat-ud-Dawa. Yes. But in any event, you are right that the government policy is not very clear about it, and that was the point that Mr. Auqaab Malik was also making, that we have to decide which way we are headed. And unless we turn our direction, we can only go south. Questions? You have the floor, sir, and then you.
Director General for Pakistan House. I have a very brief comment on Auqaab's presentation. Auqaab, you have raised interesting points, but what is your suggestion? Because you have been involved for 7 years almost now, 6 years. You were in 2009. Why don't you suggest some solution today for us? So we try to move forward and suggest to the government as well.
Short solution, please.
Well, if we have short solutions, we'd finished a long time ago. The main problem is politics here. Main problem is securing political constituencies. Main problem is talking to people that really don't want to talk and they want to do what they want, but you're trying to build political capital. I find, and this is my point of view, that Pakistan was going through an existential threat well before 2008. However, when you're going through an existential threat and you're going through instability, existential threat means something that is a threat to your survival through terrorism, which was increasing at that time. And then changing your system at the time, which is crucial for you to provide unity, so you're together, and then you can extinguish that threat, changing the system to a half-hearted, hijacked democracy. It's not a democracy. This is an oligarchy. This has been hijacked by the wrong people. When you have democracy, you have democratization of the parties. There's no democratization of the parties. It's all hereditary. So you need to resolve your issues there first.
It's not with reference to NACTA.
That is now becoming a political debate.
Yeah.
We are talking of the future of NACTA. To my mind, the future of NACTA will remain bleak.
That's it. Okay. I agree. No. That's the short answer.
Short answers.
Sir, I basically have 2 questions, one from Mr. Auqaab, another from Mr. Jaspal. So if I'm allowed to ask 2 questions.
First question.
Okay, sir. The first, first question is from Mr. Auqaab. Sir, during your address, sir, you talked about the false interpretation of Islam used by the militant groups. So my question is very much elementary, that is it the fault, is it a fault of original Islamic narrative, or is it is it the lackness of on our side that we are not being able to propagate the actual image of Islam in our socio-economic affairs, which has paved the way for these these sort of radical and extremist factions to propagate their false interpretation of Islam. And then you also talked about the supporters. So we also have many supporters even in our parliament who support their narratives. Sir, my question is that, all those supporters, they are all in very minute quantity. So my question is, sir, why not, sir, identify those supporters and treat them in the same way as we treat those militants? Because, sir, they are not the representative of the majority. And question to Mr. Jaspal. So you talked about the...
Your first question is
okay, sir. Okay.
First of all, let's hear the answer.
You're talking about a narrative that we're not using. Pakistan, the white part of the flag indicates that there are minorities here as well. And the interpretation of Islam in Pakistan is various. It's not just one interpretation in this country. You have Brelvis, you have Nobandis, Sufis, you've got Hanbali, you've got Eliadis, etc., 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 who have their own interpretation. And this is where the problem lies. I mean, this is my point of view. When you have Islam as representing the state, personally, I believe that religion should be separated from the state, and as a result, you can engage in your private life without intervening in the state policies. And that's where the problem lies, because everybody in any religion believes that their religion is right. Otherwise, why wouldn't you be another religion or another interpretation? And that's where the absolutism comes, because it comes from God. And so if you believe yours is right, whether you're a Jew, you're a Hindu, anything, then you're going to believe in that absolutely. You have a problem in policy formation then, and you have a problem then. And that's where everybody comes up. Now we need to have a different narrative, and that means everybody has a right to say what they want, but do not use violence. That's the best narrative, which we haven't applied.
Okay.
And in fact, we support those people who do use that narrative.
Good.
Thank you very much.
This is a question which is more than 1400 years old. We have been debating this for more than 1400 years and we have not reached a solution. Do you think that we are going to reach a solution in this seminar? There is no single version of Islam. Let's put it this way. There is no single interpretation of Islam. There are many sects of Islam. They have different interpretations of Islam. Everybody thinks that their interpretation is right. The Takfiris believe that everybody else is liable to be put to death. So what are you going to do about it? It's an issue of narrative. How do you present Islam? Is it a tolerant religion or is it an intolerant religion? IS says it's an intolerant religion. If you are a Christian, you are liable to be killed. If you are captured in battle, you are a slave. If you are a woman, you are a slave. So, let's not get into this debate of Islam versus Islam. We are never going to resolve it. I think Mr. Auqaab is right. The only thing the narrative should have is violence must be eschewed at all costs. Because Islam definitely does not preach violence as such. So if we can agree on one thing, that by itself will resolve a lot of our problems and everybody will be free to practice their religion as they want. Next question.
I'm Anam Khan. Sir Auqaab, while confronting the challenges by violent non-state actors, you're right, we do have to put on our own house in order. But what about the foreign fundings that they get? Isn't it better that first we cut off them economically and then post forward? Maybe that would be a lot more successful. What's your saying?
Would you want to respond?
Concerning foreign funding, this is one of the biggest issues that has occurred for the last 40 years. During the Afghan Jihad, the Mujahideen and relative, now we call militants, were built up with foreign funding directly. And much of it came not just from the US, but it came from Saudi and many of the Arab states. Now when you're building funding up, you make linkages. You have, therefore, you have certain political economy. So you become to rely on this funding a little bit. And as a result, those people who are funding have certain priorities of their own. They have vested interests. They want something out of this, no doubt. During the Afghan war, there was realization there was a bit of proxy war going on in Afghanistan, the United States vis-a-vis the USSR, but also after that, there was a proxy war between Pakistan and India, Saudi especially, and Iran in Afghanistan. That's where the problem was. So, how do we get rid of this? The National Internal Security Policy, which is defunct, by the way, didn't really mention, but I'd like to mention the building up of the Ministry of Finance, linking up with the State Bank, linking up with customs, linking up with private banks, linking up with foreign currency exchanges to have a robust policy of making sure they can track where the funding is from. But a lot of the funding is black. Havala. It's through a system where somebody pays some money and you do it on a basis of a promise or a chit. How are you going to track that? Modern utensils can't do that. So you're going to have to infiltrate. And that takes human labor-intensive effort, which is very dangerous. And who's got to do that? The police. And they can't. They don't have the capacity. We need to build that up. This is the long-term effort then.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Just a little, in addition to this, for the last 9 months I've been pursuing a particular youth exchange, or at least allowing some of our students, if nothing else, not on a national scale, because I recognize that Pakistan and China don't really have a people-to-people interaction. And our students are very much limited to the environment here, rarely go out, and much of the media that they receive is from the West or from India and Pakistan. So it's very limited in that respect, and their perception of what China is. And as a result, I organized, and I was recently able to secure a fully funded 100% trip for at least 10 of our students, which I want to incorporate on a permanent basis for every year. But that's going to take a little effort. But this is our initiative. And this is on a personal basis, which should be taken up by the government, actually, more than anybody else.
Sorry, I just want to add one quick sentence. When there was a federal youth ministry, I do know that there were exchanges between Pakistan and China on that. Now, since it's been devolved at the provincial level, I think there are also different strategies that different provinces are taking.
There is, I think, an agreement between Pakistan and China about the exchange of students numbering into a few thousands, but it needs to be expanded much further. And we need to begin to teach Chinese in our schools to children. I think that was the last question. And with this admonition, I think now I should let you go. It is 5:17 already. The Dean is getting tired. I thank the speakers for their excellent presentations, and I thank the audience for its great patience. Thank you.
Now we give souvenirs to the speakers. Dr. Jaspal. Dr. Auqaab Malik. Malik Uzair Khan. Dr. Zafar Khan. And with the speakers and the chair, can we have a picture here? Sure. All the speakers. Whoever is present.
Whatever is left.